Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Lorber. I'm the director of Rain Taxi, and it's such a pleasure to be with you tonight. We have missed you. Thank you for tuning in. We have 45 minutes of artistic and literary fun for you, and we hope you're all cozied up and ready to enjoy it. Keep in mind that you can send comments and questions for any of the speakers to us through the chat. We'll try to get to some of those along the way, but we want to kick off tonight with two important messages. One is that we know how challenged everyone is at this extraordinary time, and our hearts are with you. We hope that, like us, you're finding comfort and challenge and all good things in the art of literature. The other message is of solidarity. We here at Rain Taxi know that Black Lives Matter, and like many arts organizations, we're asking ourselves how we can do better at expressing that knowledge. Our board has already issued an anti-racism pledge, which you can find on the mission statement of our website. We invite you to read that and give us feedback because that's an ongoing conversation. On the program level, because we are dedicated to publications and events that help healing and awareness, we're working on an exciting new project. And to tell you more about that, I want to invite our board member and a wonderful Minneapolis poet, Mary Moore Easter. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much and welcome everyone. I am delighted to announce Rain Taxi's upcoming chapbook of Minnesota Black poets. And it's best explained by these sentences from their invitation to submit. Eric and I wrote this together. So here it is. I am writing to invite you to submit a poem to an upcoming chapbook that Rain Taxi will be publishing, which will be an anthology of new work responding to the murder of George Floyd and or resulting protests, conflicts, aspirations by some of the great Black writers of the Twin Cities. This is not an open call, but a personal invitation. As a member of Rain Taxi's board, I am energized by our plans to support and promote the Black poets of our community. I'm excited to edit this chapbook, which will be released this fall, soon, in time for our organization's 20th annual Twin Cities Book Festival. A reading by poets in the chapbook will be part of the festival as well. Through the publication and the event, Rain Taxi seeks to use its platform to amplify Black voices and to showcase poetry as a necessary, thought-spurring, reflection-making, life-giving human art. The second page of the letter is our anti-racism pledge, which, as Eric just mentioned, you can find on the Rain Taxi website. I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. I'm happy to report that this letter went out to 19 poets. And though the deadline isn't until August 15th, we have received several letters of gratitude for the invitation and one long poem already. I'm eager for more. That's it.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm eager for it as well. We're always so excited to publish a new chapbook. And we actually have published one anthology chapbook previously, which was Bridge, a Gathering, which was an anthology of poems dedicated to healing in the wake of the 35W bridge collapse. I hope this one affords as much healing in our community, and I know it will. As Mary mentioned, our festival will be taking place. Normally, we bring over 6,000 people into one big room in mid-October. We can't do that this year for safety's sake, but we can do a lot online, and we're going to. We're building an exciting new website, and I want to invite everyone to keep tabs on what we're doing there, to stay in the loop, and to come back in October for 3 days of festival fun. Now I want to get into our actual issue party, and like every issue of Rain Taxi, this one starts with a beautiful cover, because so many of us have been yearning to go inside galleries and museums and studios and not able to do so in these past months, we thought it would be fun if cover artist Jill Evans gave us a tour of her art and her studio. Jill was supposed to have an exhibit of this painting and others in this series this spring. That, of course, like so many other public events, is on hold. So this is a real treat. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Eric. I'm so happy to be here tonight with the Rain Taxi Party. And so welcome to my studio. My studio is in a 19th century warehouse in downtown Minneapolis. And I'm also part of an artist co-op called Traffic Zone Center for Visual Art. And there are 22 artists in this co-op. The building also supports writers. Grey Wolf Press and James and Mary Laurie booksellers are here. So we are surrounded by great writers and great books. I'd also like to introduce somebody who's with me tonight. My husband, Charles Tolliver, is coming around. And he's going to be kindly offered to help move the Zoom camera for me. You'll see behind me stacks of large paintings. These are part of the Heart Bright Dark series. And as Eric pointed out, the painting on the cover of Rain Taxi this summer is part of that series. I started this series about 3 years ago when I decided to think about how light conveys content in painting. And I began by going to the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and I chose 5 historical paintings whose depiction of light carried specific emotional content to me that moved me, and not necessarily in a positive way. I spent a year going to the museum and working in person and making hundreds of studies, and then bringing what I was learning from that back into my own work and abstraction. When I look at the Heart Bright Dark series now, and I'm trying to discern what the light is doing in the work, it almost seems to me that the light is acting like pincers, like the lightest passages of paint are like fingers delicately lifting up the surface and keeping the pictorial space from collapsing, because that's what pictorial space always wants to do. So you need something. The other thing I wanted to mention is that people are often very curious as to how artists working with abstraction begin. And for many years now, I've been basing my work on observations of natural phenomena, the natural world, and also these historical paintings, such as the ones that were involved with this group. One of the reasons I enjoy looking at historical paintings is because they are not of our time. So there's a sort of surface strangeness to them that compels me to want to take them apart and figure out how they were made. I've also been working on in a new iPad app for the last couple of years. And this app allows me to layer imagery and develop my paintings for abstraction in this much quicker way. So I have some examples on the other side of the studio. If you want to take a small turn with me, and I'll show you what those look like. This is a painting that I made this spring, and the image above it is the iPad sketch that I developed to work from, to translate into a painting. And I'm not trying to copy the iPad sketch, but I'm using it as a place to start. The 2 images to the side, this is a winter sunrise and a flood image, are 2 photographs that I took that I layered into the app to help me get started. I've been taking hundreds of pictures of Minnesota floods over the last 10 years. And when I look into these very dense, layered, complex disaster landscapes, I want to order them. I want to try to make some sense out of them. And I want to use them to build a structure that you can live in for a while. But I also want to be startled and woken up to something that I see. So we have one more spot to show you in the studio. I'm still thinking about light. The French artist Seurat, the painter we remember who built his pictures out of those little tiny dots of color, said that emotion comes through tone and value. He said he had to get the values right in his paintings, in the colors, to get the right emotional temper. And so going forward, I'm starting to collect my own observations of the light that I live in Minnesota, and that's what I'm going to concentrate on. So I've been starting to make oil studies out, observing light in the landscape, but I'm also taking lots of photographs, some examples behind me here of artificial light and natural light in all different times and places. And I hope to travel in the state to take more and more. Light has temperature, it has intensity, has different vibrations. I have no idea where this is gonna go, but this is where I'm heading next. And I hope to make paintings that have a really wide margin and range of emotion that surprises me. And I hope surprises you too. So thank you for coming. And over to you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Jill. What a wonderful tour. And boy, we can't wait to mask up and come see those in person. Thanks again. Our print issue, which by the way is our 98th print issue, so we have a milestone coming up, kicks off with an appreciation of the amazing writer Louise Erdrich. This appreciation was penned by a Minneapolis legend in the literary community, James P. Lenfestey. Jim Lenfestey this year was awarded the K. Sexton Award from the Minnesota Book Awards for his years of dedication and service to this community. He comes to us tonight, actually, from an outpost in Michigan. Jim, I hope it's okay if I reveal that little nugget.
Sure.
Jim, you know, something I love about this piece is that you pretty deftly set the arc of Louise's career against some important awakenings in Native American literature and Native American, our recognition of Native American culture here in the Midwest. And I would love it if you'd give us a little expanded view of that tonight. I know that in a 2-page review, it's tough to fit it all in.
I'd be happy to, Eric, and thanks. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to write for Rain Taxi. You've created a wonderful and necessary publication, and I'm kind of amazed that it's 25 years old. It seems like yesterday that you started it, you and Kelly. So congratulations. So I grew up in a small town in northeastern Wisconsin, and I grew up on the east side of the river. The west side of the river began the Oneida Reservation, and the other side of that was the Menominee Reservation. And it's useful in terms of thinking of Louise's book, The Night Watchman, which is about the problem of termination. The first reservation to be terminated in the United States was the Menominee Reservation. And the first Native protests that I ever saw in person were the beginning organization of a group called Drones, which is the united determination of the Menominee to overturn the already clear calamitous effects of termination for that reservation. So this was so I was a young professor, very, in my early 20s at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, and I founded a course in American Indian literature. And it was one of the first in the country. But I did it because I had that experience, and I had 3 other things actually behind me. One was this lightning bolt, which was the awarding of the Pulitzer Prize to N. Scott Malmedy, a brilliant lyrical painter and writer, Kiowa. And it's a phenomenal book then, and well worth reading at any time. And it was and the thunder of that has reverberated ever since. So he won that, and that the following year I started my course, but it turned out to be at the beginning of something widely known today as the Native American Renaissance. And that included these wonderful writers, Leslie Silko and Gerald Visner, Dwayne Natum, so many others that came along that began to appear, one and then another and then two and then five and then 10. And I followed that along in real time. But I also heard something else, Eric, that I mentioned in the review. The beginning, I was in graduate school when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we became very active in those issues and in civil rights issues. But it was in the late 60s that the Native civil rights protests began in earnest in a new wave. I think quite possibly inspired by King and everything that had happened around his life. But the American Indian movement was founded in Minneapolis in the late 60s. It went on, of course, to rock the nation with its takeover of Wounded Knee in 1973. Before that, an event that I closely followed was the takeover of the Alcatraz Island, which was in the 1969, 1968, 69, one of those years, and went on for a couple of years with a very interesting premise, by the way. The protesters said there's a law which says that vacant or excess federal land goes back to the natives. Of course, that had never happened, but they actually had a right to do this, and it raised that issue greatly. So suddenly we have the drumbeats of the Native protest movement taking off in our country, and I'm hearing them. So I opened this course and then followed along this incredible renaissance. And a detail I didn't put in the article, I think it was Blue Cloud Quarterly, but it might have been a particular issue of the South Dakota Review about 1969, but there was a little monastery, there is a little monastery in a tiny little town in North Dakota that for years put out the Blue Cloud Quarterly, and they were open to Native writers and published a lot of wonderful people that we now know. And then the South Dakota Quarterly put out a call for Native writers, not really them not knowing for sure what was there. It was a flood. There were so many Native writers looking for a place to put their work. So, as you know, this went on. So then what I call the sort of great efflorescence of this occurred in 1984 with the publication of Louise Erdrich's Love Medicine, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award. I voted for it as a book critic at the time. And there was something in her style and her voice and this wonderful poetic quality and her humor, her sly humor, her completely memorable characters. I remember them all still. I remember one mistake I made in the review because I said, I remember thinking this, I don't know if I wrote it or not, but I remember she was being interviewed at some point in those days and she said, "Now, this is part of a trilogy." And I said to myself, at least, and I might have said in print, "Yeah, right. No way. I mean, how can you? No, I mean, you got one book here, good for you." Well, the nub of the review, as you know, for your book was her 16th novel. She never stopped. And I've read them all, reviewed several along the way, and it was a great honor to review her latest, which called The Night Watchman, which I believe is yet another masterpiece from her pen. It has, I said in the review, this is true. I was in the middle of reading it and I texted my family. I said, "Oh my God, and LOL." It's both, you go, wow, I can't believe what I'm reading, and laugh out loud. There were a couple of passages. There's one, I mean, this good character, Patrice, is in the backseat of a car being told about sex by her friend. And you just have to put the book down. You're laughing so hard. It's just so marvelous. So she has humor and she writes with the glorious pen of a poet. And it's kind of forgotten now, or I won't say forgotten, but it's less well known because of her tremendous success as a novelist. And as you and the listeners know, she's won virtually every award. And I think she'll win all the awards for this one this year. That she began as a poet. She went from Dartmouth College, she went and received an MFA at Johns Hopkins, determined to be a writer. And I had a bit of good luck. She opened a bookstore right down the street from me. How that happened, just a gift of the gods to me. And I got wind of that she was giving talks to local people about her writing process. This was unadvertised. I mean, I don't know how anybody knew about it. Somehow I heard it on the wind. I ran down there. I caught one of, I think, 5. But I heard her say this. I've never forgotten it. She said, I wanted it. And here's what that means. She said, I studied, I read all the magazines that accepted stories. And I analyzed those stories. Which ones worked? Why did they accept it? What was it in this story that made it work? I mean, Cosmopolitan, Red Book. I mean, it was, what is it that makes those stories work? So that I could learn the technique. And then she did something that all writers know they have to do, but many of us don't do. She said, so she'd write a story, she'd send it off to a magazine. She kept a stack of envelopes on her bedside wherever she was, even when she was working on a North Dakota highway crew in the summer. And if a rejection came in, she put it right in another envelope and sent it off. That's the business, the backstory business of what it takes to be a writer of her productivity. Just awesome. And in fact, so generally don't call her on the telephone, send her an email, or don't do a lot of things because she's not going to answer. Why not? I'm going to give you a little bit from a poem for which she's justly famous. It's one of the great poems about writing that anyone has ever written. It's called Advice to Myself. And it begins, let the celery rot in the bottom drawer of the refrigerator, and an earthen scum harden on the kitchen floor. Leave the black crumbs in the bottom of the toaster. And at the end, recycle the mail. Don't read it. Don't read anything except that which destroys the insulation between yourself and your experience, or what pulls down, or what strikes at, or what shatters this ruse you call necessity. That poem was called Advice to Myself. I have as a broadside in my kitchen at home. And it's the best advice any writer can get. It's hard to follow, but she has proven it over and over through the years. I'll just cite, before I go into a little bit about Night Watchman, I'll cite this incredible National Geographic did a series where they hired writers known for their region to write something about that region, and she did hers for our region. She was hired for our region, and she wrote a lovely book I can't recommend highly enough, called Of Books and Islands. And she said, books and islands are so mixed up with me now, I kind of can't tell the difference, because she goes up in the summer to Lake of the Woods. Lake of the Woods is this huge lake with 15,000 islands. It's the product of a billion-year-old volcanic explosion, and then the erosion, and these little stone islands are all through. And many of them have petroglyphs on them, paintings from people, some 400 years old, some 1,000 years old. And she talked about reading those islands and reading books. And reading has been fundamental to her sense of herself, including reading these beautiful old islands. It's just a delicious book. So I need to end. So I'm just going to tell you about Night Watchman. First, don't miss it. There's 2 stories. And the frame story is about her beloved real-life grandfather that she renames Thomas Wajak, which means muskrat. The great story of the great creation story in our part of the world is the Earth Diver, where the muskrat goes down and brings back a little mud and puts it on the back of the turtle, and we are living on the back of the great turtle. That's her grandfather transformed into this incredible character who helps the tribe get organized to fight the process of termination. That's the outer frame. Then she creates a character called Patrice Parenteau, the granddaughter, who goes to the city of Minneapolis and gets into some very dangerous times looking for her sister who has vanished there. Love Medicine, which was the name of her first book, is all through this. One of her geniuses is she completely understands love, and that it's cannot be understood. And she so beautifully creates, everybody is in a love medicine, and love always turns you, always surprises you. Everybody is surprised by love in this book and all her books, as we are in life. The book is a masterpiece, and I really hope everybody will read it. And of course, then we look forward to, guess what? Her 17th novel, whatever that will be. So that's a little bit about my admiration for Louise Erdrich, who is one of the greatest writers that we have in our time.
No doubt. Thank you so much, Jim. What a treat to hear you effuse about something that deserves effusiveness. I want to point out to our viewers on YouTube that the Night Watchman, Louise's books, all the books we're going to talk about tonight are available at your local independent bookstore, whether they're open for browsing, doing curbside pickup, whatever they're doing. They can help you, they can hook you up with some great reading, and we encourage you to patronize them. We'll put in our chat and in our description a link to one of our favorite bookstores here in the Twin Cities, but there are so many both here and across the country, and they all need our involvement. So thank you for that. Also, you can become a member of Rain Taxi if you'd like. You can order this issue or any issue on our website. We would love to have as many readers as possible in our circle. So thanks for that, Jim. I'd love now to maybe continue the poetry theme you snuck in there by inviting two poets I hugely admire to talk with each other. I gotta say that one of the thrills of publishing Rain Taxi is when we get to review a first book that feels electrically exciting. And even more so when we get to match that book with a reviewer who is really up to the task. So I want to present to you now one of our longtime poetry reviewers, Tyrone Williams, a terrific poet in his own right, and Andrea Phillips, author of the already multiple award-winning debut book, Hull. And the two of them are going to have a conversation. Welcome, Tyrone and Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Andrea. Nice to
Hi,
meet you.
Tyrone. Nice to meet you too.
So, I actually, and I hate to impose on you, but I hope you have your book in front of you. Good. Okay. Because first of all, I really, really enjoyed the book when Nightboat sent it to me, and I hope you can tell. I hope you can tell from the review that there were several poems, and those are the ones actually, at least one of those, I would like you to read that I didn't get a chance to talk as much about in the review. And I think I mentioned them actually one of them toward the end. But before I get to that one, is it okay if I ask you to read the poem, one of the poems that I actually did mention at least, and because I think it's just an important and wonderful poem, and that's Erica Gardner and John Henry-ism.
Sure. I feel like that's like the one, I feel like that's the poem that gets the least play.
Really?
In the book. Yeah, I've never read it aloud. I felt I was unsure when I included it in the manuscript. It's something you're not supposed to say. It's like saying you don't love all your kids the same, but
yeah.
I don't have kids though, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm excited. I'll read this poem for sure.
Okay.
I'm gonna dust the dust off of it. All right. Erica Garner and John Henry-ism said, "This hammer, an oyster knife, this weaponized praxis and bound wet acumen, build backfiring crossbow. I'm spent, and every arrow that doesn't claim me names me. I'll die with a hammer in my hand, asthma in my aria, and impulse thrumming the labor nerve numb. Bootstraps fondled in impatience are themselves tiny nooses. How many cells in my body committed suicide today? Tell me this, and I'll build you an underground fire escape. Every molecule serves an abortive god, laying tendon in blood roots. When I stake my shoulders against the steel sinew of the state, worth becomes a deadly trait to demonstrate.
So this, for me at least, this poem is even more relevant today than it was, you know, I don't know when you wrote it, but you know, when it was included in the book. And because I read it, and this is part of one of the reasons I'm really interested and fascinated by it. And this alludes to what you said before about not loving all your children equally. It's because, among other things, it seems to me a critique of what we today call toxic masculinity, but within the context of our quote unquote black male heroes, and what that involves, and particularly those last few lines, it seems to me to really nail that down. And the title itself, Erica Gardner on one hand, right, and then John Henry ism, and that ism points to at least from my reading of it, like a trait, something that we've inherited in terms of the kind of heroes that we demand. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I really flip-flopped between keeping it John Henry and going back and forth between John Henry and John Henryism. And I think what became important for me was like that lineage or that passing down, the John Henryism that lives in many of us, that kind of self-sabotaging need to improve or excel. Something I think about a lot. I think a lot of people who have MFAs might resonate with that as well. But I don't know, I wasn't thinking too much about toxic masculinity, more so just I think I was thinking about all the many ways the state can get you, I guess, in kind of a depressing way. And just, I think a lot about Erica Garner, who died trying to make a better world for everyone after her dad passed away. And just, she died from things that could have probably been addressed. And so I think a lot about that, just the way that John Henryism is the end of many of us, and how we can, I guess, see it in ourselves versus kind of, for me, it works best when it's invisible. When I just keep wondering what I'm doing wrong and keep self-correcting, that's when the John Henryism flourishes. So trying to be mindful of it, naming it, and maybe taking a step back, I guess.
Okay. I'm sure part of the reason why I was thinking of it in those lines is because I don't know if you know the Colson Whitehead novel, John Henry Days.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so I actually taught that this last spring. And so it was very much in my mind because that novel is very much about this kind of inhabitation of this kind of tradition of this lineage, starting with John Henry. Are there any other poems in the book that, I mean, I could sit here and talk about my favorite poems in the book, and make you read them or something like that. But are there any things that, for example, I missed in my review that you think perhaps need to be emphasized?
I feel like every review kind of shows me something new about my work. So I don't really hold any review to like covering everything, I think. And so I don't have anything to say that you missed, but I'm happy to read more work. I'm sorry if that's a cop-out answer.
No. And believe me, I have no, Eric knows this about me. I have no ego about my writing and reviews and so forth. It's, I do what I do, and then, I turn it over and let other people fill in the blanks or correct things and so forth. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but don't feel any need to tiptoe around I have no ego in this at all. What about this poem I didn't even mention, but Sometimes Boyhood.
Sure, happy to read that.
Yeah.
I should know what page it's on, but
54.
oh, thank you. That was
Well,
very, very generous. This is Sometimes Boyhood. Hovering their mouths, like two men, moments before they turn on each other. That is how the grass smells. Need between boys. I wanted a love like a shared look, so relieved to be touching, so angry it took so long, too easy to rehearse into fragility. As a boy, I couldn't hide a single soft thing, round with lemon skin, under her shirt, silken folds of fat. The boy thinks she is a canal for shame, where goodness ends, the scent of new blood, a red scout of longing. Through her private dimension, the boy tables girlhood, and the sweat is good sweat, a flock of braying gestures, shaving September grains, a cunning hunt for each other's touch, two men sparring over who could end the other's suffering first. Bliss shame from the body. Was I not one of them, disarming a denim ilk, praying his sword would land amidst my vast acreage?
beautiful, beautiful. So I don't know how much time. How much time do we have left? I have no. I wasn't even paying attention. Oh, okay. Thank you. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about this theme that runs throughout the sort of threading throughout the book about boyhood, girlhood, and so
Yeah,
forth?
sure. I mean, I think um, a lot, I think those poems are kind of, there's like, I think two particular poems that are kind of more from a younger voice and addressing gender.
Mhm.
And for me, while I don't identify as any part of the binary, male or female, that kind of hearkening back to that gendered language for me serves two purposes. One, it's like a kind of an important translation for how I was viewing my kind of tomboyness and not really having any friends that were girls and just kind of being confused about a lot of things, sexuality, gender, all of it. And then it also serves as kind of a language for folks who are more entrenched in the binary to think about this, because we know both are not true. The speaker is neither a girl nor a boy, they're a grown individual, but having that kind of these two pairings to bounce off between is to kind of, I guess, for some people show that there is a severity or some kind of change, or I guess more so a dissonance occurring between how this person is being perceived in the world and how they see themselves, which is, I guess, a young me. But is there any, what else did you want me to say? You said boyhood. Is my time up? I could also stop if I need to.
Well, if we had more time, I would definitely want you to talk a little bit about, and this is probably just for my own, so, you know, the work of Don Lundy Martin, which also interrogates some of these issues too, along the same lines in terms of this in-between zone that you're
Yeah.
talking about. But I think we're probably out of time. So, well, thank you, though. Thank you. It's wonderful talking to you. Have a briefly.
Could I drop like one Don Lundy Martin quote?
Yes,
It's like, she says, like, a boy is not a body, a boy is a walk.
exactly.
And I think it's something that a thing I've carried in my craft and pedagogy without even really realizing it. Thank you for talking about Don.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, thanks to you both. What a rich conversation. And we actually have a question from one of our viewers out there somewhere, and perhaps motivated by Xandria's very generous comment about not holding reviewers to cover everything. I think I heard a lot of reviewers breathe a sigh of relief on hearing that. But have you ever reviewed someone else's work? And if so, what's it like to change from the artist's hat to the critic's hat.
Oh, this is for me, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Yeah, I actually, for a while, I was doing book reviews for The Wilds, which is like the press, the sister press to Platypus Press. They're like a UK-based lit journal. So I've done a few book reviews. I did a couple for Winter Tangerine. I think I did a lot of them before I ever wrote a book. And I think I was writing a lot of book reviews to help me figure out how books were just put together. And also I just wanted to kind of beef up my, like, I guess my analytical skills. And there's nothing better to do that than having like this imagined audience you have to present this work to. So for me, reviewing, as much as it feels kind of solidified and serious, also feels very much like an exercise just in like reading and writing. It's a great way to just get your juices flowing and have a better understanding about like, what do you look for in work? And for me, I don't really review work that I don't feel strongly about. I don't really set out to write a review that's going to cut work down. But now that I've written a book, I have less interest in reviewing books. I don't know what that's about. And I hope I circle back on that and I get back into reviewing, but they feel kind of like, it's kind of like wearing your shirt inside out is the short answer to that question. If you don't want to, write a book, just wear your shirt inside out, and that's a book review.
Well, thank you for that answer. And when you circle back, you'll certainly have a welcome spot in Rain Taxi too. So
Thank you.
I want to remind our viewers that Hull and all the books we're talking about tonight are available from your local independent bookstore. They would love to send you a copy of that. As thrilling as it is when we get to publish reviews like Tyrone's review of Xandria's book, we occasionally get to pen one ourselves. And our staff member, Linda Stack Nelson, recently got to write about a book she admired in a genre that she loves, and she's going to briefly tell us about it now. Hey, Linda.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much. So the book that I reviewed for this latest print edition of Rain Taxi, which you can order from the link in the description, is from a genre that I'm really passionate about and interested in, and that I think is really on the rise, which is innovative literary YA. So the book is called Black Girl Unlimited. It's by an author and performance artist named Echo Brown. And what's really interesting about this book is that it's incredibly genre bending. So it is autobiographical in some parts. It talks a lot about the place that the author grew up and the circumstances that she grew up in. And some of the characters are based on people that she knew or her siblings. But it also includes a lot of other people that are sort of inclusions and inventions based on the conceit of the story, which is a sort of contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy, magical realism pull-in that basically talks about this concept of the people that she is surrounded by being consumed by a black veil. And the book takes her all the way from the age of about 5, when she almost dies in a fire in her apartment, to college. So it's a very large span of time, and it really covers this huge swath of the protagonist's life. But it talks all throughout about this black veil, and it's a very literal thing within the text, but it sort of reflects trauma and the trauma that the characters go through in terms of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, religion, poverty, disability. It's this huge scope of a book that is so unique and innovative in its actual text, which is very unusual for YA, but is something that is really on the come up in YA and that I'm really, really excited to see more of. So that is why I decided to review that book. And I hope that if anyone else is interested in that kind of innovative YA, that you might also want to go out and take a look at it too.
Thanks, Linda. That's so great. And by the way, everyone, Linda is sporting a Rain Taxi mission statement t-shirt. So if you consider yourself aesthetically adventurous and you need a new t-shirt, you can probably snag one of those from us. I think we are starting to run out of some sizes, and but we'll gladly fill any orders we get. Also wanted to remind you, great time to become a member of Rain Taxi, great time to snag this latest issue, our 98th print issue. And in general, I hope you'll keep in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. Let us know how we did. Let us know if we should do this again. I want to remind you also about Mary's comments at the start of our session tonight. We're thrilled to be publishing a chapbook this fall of writings by Black poets of the Twin Cities. One of the poets who sadly won't be in that anthology is the late J. Otis Powell, a legend in the Minneapolis poetry community who passed away 2 years ago. Before he died, Rain Taxi had the privilege of publishing a chapbook by J. Otis called Pieces of Sky. And I want to end our session tonight with a brief 5-line poem from this chapbook by the wonderful J. Otis Powell called This Damn World. To have a place to live, I've recreated the universe. I'm writing an afterlife in case the dominant culture over there thinks of me as an object. Without poetry, fiction, and music, I'd settle for this damn world, which makes me sweat, beg, and lie for food, shelter, and love. Thanks, everyone. Be well. We love you. Good night.